Hey folks, this is Rhykker with another Diablo 3 Necromancer video. Legendary items for the Necromancer have been finally added to the beta. This is what we have been waiting for. Now, sets in, items are in, all the skills are in, now the real testing starts. In this video, we'll give an overview of every new item, and while that's happening, we're going to have some gameplay playing right here in the background. And this is a pet build that is now being buffed by the new legendary items. I'm doing a T11 Rift. I'm far from optimized, but so far I'm liking what I'm seeing. Although, survivability is a big problem. But onto the items. The first that we'll cover is the new item set that was added, the Gerawan Arms. This is a one-hand and shield combination. The 2-piece set bonus is Army of the Dead gains the effect of the unconventional warfare rune. We went over in our last skill overview video, Army of the Dead Unconventional Warfare has been fixed. You now see the visual. And based on both the visual look of the set, as well as the buff to Army of the Dead, this is clearly intended to pair with the pet set, Rothma's or Bones of Rothma. Let's start by going over the new phylacteries. That's the offhand specific to the Necromancer. First, we have Lost Time. Your cold skills reduce the movement speed of enemies by 30%. In addition, your movement speed is increased by 4 to 5% for 5 seconds. Maximum 5 stacks or a total of 25 potential increased move speed. I can definitely see this being potentially used in a speed build. Next, we have Ledger's Disdain. Grim Scythe, a generator, deals an additional 7 to 10% damage for each point of essence it restores. Grim Scythe is a generator that recovers 12 essence per enemy hit. So at minimum, against one enemy, we're talking about 120% increased damage. While not impressive in and of itself, when you're hitting multiple targets, now we're possibly getting into something that is meaningful damage. Could we potentially see a generator focused build for the Necromancer? I'm not sure about that, but we'll have to wait and see as we experiment. Next phylactery, we have the Iron Rose. Attacking with Siphon Blood while at full life has between a 15 and 25% chance to cast a free Blood Nova. In practice, this doesn't trigger very often. I have a roll of 22%, which is pretty close to max, and I was getting a Blood Nova every few seconds. It's a nice little buff, but it's not something that I would build around. It certainly doesn't help that Blood Nova is a pretty close range skill, whereas Siphon Blood is typically something you want to use at a bit longer range, because if you're using it in close range, odds are you won't be at full health. And this can only trigger when you're at full life. So I'm a little less impressed with this item. Then lastly, we have Bone Ringer, which I have in the cube here. The damage bonus of command skeletons increases by 30% every second while active. Now at first, I thought that this was terrible, because if I'm not mistaken, previously, command skeletons' active ability only lasted for about 5 seconds. But with this recent patch, the active ability for command skeletons now lasts until the target dies or you change the target command. This is huge. This means that if you're up against a Rift Guardian that takes, say, a minute to kill, then for every second you're gaining 30% more damage. By 60 seconds, that's 1,800% more damage. This is a very, very interesting phylactery, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen with it. Next, we'll take a look at the rings, starting with the Circle of Neluge. Oh my god, it's Julian backwards. I just realized that. Julian Love, okay, alright. You might have seen Julian Love in the Q&As. He's one of the top guys on the Necromancer, and he's the lead technical artist for Diablo 3 and has been on the project since before it was released. He is a huge, huge, huge fan of the Necromancer. His passion is without question. So the Circle of Neluge, you now raise an additional skeletal mage with each cast, and they last an additional up to 4 seconds. I got a poop roll. I don't often swear in my videos, but now I have to be even more cautious than usual because of new YouTube guidelines of swearing getting demonetized. Anyway, this ring is amazing. This ring does not allow you to go beyond your max of 10 skeletal mages, but it makes it ridiculously easy to always have 10 skeletal mages up. You only have to cast it 5 times to get your max stacks of 10, which is very important for the Bones of Rothma set. The 6-piece set bonus, you're going to want to have all 10 out when you're casting Army of the Dead. And yes, it does work with the Singularity rune, so that's the one that spends all your essence and becomes more powerful based on how much essence you spent, so you can have 2 of those guys. Really great. Next ring we'll take a look at is Lornell's Sunstone. Your damage reduction is increased by up to 0.95% for every 1% life you are missing. So that means if you are missing half of your life, then you have 47.5% damage reduction. And if you're down to 1% health, you have 95% damage reduction. Let's take a look at how this works. We're gonna run, we're gonna get hit by some door throwers, and we're dead. We're gonna go and get hit by some quill rats. Maybe. They're too stunned. We're gonna go and get hit by some zombies. So keep an eye on our toughness here. You can see our toughness went up, skyrocketed up there. As you can see, our toughness rises the more damage we take. As we heal, our toughness goes down. There you go. I saw us go up to about 200 some odd million at some point when we went. There you go. 230. I saw us go all the way up to 230 roughly. So as you can see, this has kept us alive for a very long time. Definitely a very cool power. With our base toughness only being about 15 million, that ring at its peak gave us 15 times our base toughness. The 230 million toughness isn't that impressive. What's impressive is that it ballooned up from 15 million. The next ring is Crisbin's Sentence. Is this anything backwards? Nibzerk? It's more like Kristen, but they just subbed the T for a B. Anyway, Bone Spikes, Bone Spear, and Bone Spirit deal up to 150% increased damage against enemies that are stunned, frozen, charmed, feared, or blinded. So this item obviously combines very well with the Bone Spear set, buffing that Bone Spear damage, which I think we need to address the change made to the Bone Spear set, aka the Pestilence Master's Shroud. The 2-set bonus, each corpse you consume fires a corpse lance at a nearby enemy. That is a mistype. In the actual patch notes, it's a corpse fragment or a corpse lance fragment or something. They basically made it so that you can't actually modify it by the rune. For all intents and purposes, it is a corpse lance. In everything but name, it is a corpse lance. They just didn't want you to be able to benefit from the rune of corpse lance, and that's why it's disappointing. This basically puts the focus of the Bone Spear set back on Bone Spear. Anyway, very straightforward. Damage buff against CC'd, crowd-controlled enemies. Next ring, Prayer of Briggs. Uncursed enemies are pulled toward the target location when a curse is applied to them. This is a lot of fun. This is a ranged Cyclone Strike. We'll quickly show you what that looks like. We're just gonna go curse some enemies here. Well, that didn't work. And that's because I had cursed ground, cursing the ground instead of enemies, that's why. Take 2. Oh look, we're trying this curse out for the first time. We didn't fail doing this before. There we go, look at that. So, it's pretty cool. It's a one-time thing, so unlike... There you go, it's a nice grouping, it's nice grouping. Unlike Cyclone Strike that you can repeat again and again and again, this only applies once, but it groups them really tightly. It's really, really good grouping. Look at that. So that's the last of the rings. Now for the amulets, we have Haunted Visions. Simulacrum now drains 10 to 15% of your life every second and lasts twice as long. Normally, Simulacrum costs 50% health, lasts 15 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown, and the game was terminated. Basically, this is an item that it does seem to have maybe some purpose. I'm not particularly impressed with it at first impression, but if there's some, I don't know, very high cooldown reduction, simulacrum-based build that can benefit from it, that also has a lot of life regen to counteract that 10% life loss every second, because at best it'll be 10% life lost, then maybe there's some room for this item. Then we have Wisdom of Kalon, increases the maximum stacks of bone armor by 5. So bone armor typically only has 10 stacks and gives you 3% damage reduction per stack, up to a maximum of 30% damage reduction. With this item, we're up to 45% damage reduction. So we're gaining 15% damage reduction. The Necromancer has some pretty big survivability issues, and another 15% DR isn't quite enough. The Necromancer, despite receiving a lot of items, did not receive any wrist items, which we can really use a wrist item that gives damage reduction. Then lastly we have the Johnstone, curiously named. Each corpse consumed in the Land of the Dead increases your damage by 10% for up to 10 seconds after it ends. So let's take a quick look at how far we can stack this. We have equipped devouring aura that's going to just automatically consume corpses around us as they're spawned in Land of the Dead, and we'll throw in revive just to be safe. So here we go. Look at our stacks: 50, 60, 70, 80, 100, 150. Can we get 200? 200! We're blown past 200! And it stopped. There we go. 243. 243 stacks, folks. It's only for 10 seconds, though. That's important to note. But that is 2,430% increased damage for those 10 seconds. Again, Land of the Dead is on a 2-minute cooldown. But if there's some crazy cooldown-focused build that can buff this could be really cool. Maybe this could be worked into the Bone Spear set. Typically with the 2-piece bonus, each corpse you consume fires a corpse lance or fragment. We used to combine this with Land of the Dead. Now, in doing so, we're going to be buffing our Bone Spear even more. Next, we'll take a look at the armor pieces, non-weapon armor pieces. Starting with the Defiler Cuisse. Your Bone Spirit's damage is increased by up to 100% for every second it is active. Now, Bone Spirit is a skill that slowly makes its way to its enemy, relatively slowly, so my understanding is that the longer it takes to reach the enemy, the more damage it'll deal. I can see this encouraging a far back ranged play style. Whether Bone Spirit really can fit into any build is to be seen. There are some promising early results, but to be determined. Next, we have Fate's Vow. It's a helm. After consuming between 15 and 20 corpses, 15 at best, you unleash a free death nova. Not impressed. That's a lot of corpses to consume before you're releasing that free death nova. And generally, by the time you have that many corpses on screen, you've probably killed most of what's on screen. At least within the area. I haven't had a chance to try out this particular item yet, but I think the number would be a lot better if it was like 5 to 10. Next, we have Requiem Cereplate. I'm guessing that's a portmanteau between ceremonial and plate. Either that or it's ceramic plate. Or it's just a nonsense word they made up, who knows. When Devour restores essence or life above your max, the excess is granted over 3 seconds. So this makes it such that it's not a waste to consume corpses and regain essence and life when you're at max. It's going to be given to you over 3 seconds, so as you're consuming essence and or losing life, you've basically got a heal over time effect, or a resource over time effect. It's certainly a good concept. In practice, how useful it is to be determined. Next, we have Moribund Gauntlets. Your golem has a 10 to 15% chance to shed a corpse when it is hit by an enemy. It's not a very high chance, and the Necromancer already has a lot of ways to generate corpses, so I don't know that I would necessarily dedicate a whole item to a slim chance to shed a corpse. Next, we have Golem Skin Breaches. Your golem's damage is increased by up to 125%, and you take 25% less damage while you are within 18 yards of it. So the golem damage buff, it's not so great. Golem just generally isn't a super great skill because it can't deal area damage. It doesn't cleave like the Gargantuan, the Witch Doctor's Gargantuan can, the Humongoid, for instance. But the 25% damage reduction is actually what makes these pants more useful. The problem is you have to follow your golem around, which is kind of annoying. But again, the Necromancer desperately needs right now damage reduction items. Next, we have Briner's Journey. Attacking with bone spikes has up to a 15% chance to cast a bone nova at the target location. Again, a 15% chance isn't particularly high. So 50% chance means 1 in every 5 to 1 in every 10 attacks with bone spikes will cast 1 bone nova. And bone nova isn't this crazy superpower like Army of the Dead. So 1 occasional bone nova is not very impressive. Maybe if it was a 30% chance, we're starting to get somewhere. But even then, that means you have to be spamming your generator. And time spent spamming your generator is time spent not spamming a more damaging power. Next we have Grasps of Essence. When an exploded corpse damages at least one enemy, your corpse explosion deals up to 100% increased damage for 6 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. So that's up to 500% more damage. This I like. Corpse explosion by itself doesn't quite deal enough damage. Maybe with this item it will be able to. It's certainly moving things in the right direction, but we'll have to see in practice. Next we have Bloodsong Male. While in the Land of the Dead, Command Skeletons gains the effect of all runes and deals up to 125% additional damage. I was very excited by this at first until I tried it out, and it's not significant enough of a buff for how short-lived it is. Again, it's dependent on Land of the Dead, which lasts 10 seconds, 12 max with a specific rune, on a 2-minute cooldown. Next we have the Corpse Whisper Pauldrons. Corpse lance damage is increased by up to 20% for 3 seconds when you consume a corpse. Max 15 stacks. That's up to 300% more damage for Corpse Lance, which is a skill that is very cool and very fun. If only Corpse Lance were still tied to the Pestilence Master's Shroud. Next we have Stewart's Greaves. You gain up to 50% increased move speed for 2 seconds after using Blood Rush. Again, I'm not super impressed by this. We have the Warzekian arm guards that I believe give you a 100% burst of speed when you destroy a wreckable object. So this kind of pales in comparison to what's already a not very impressive item. Will it have some application in speedrun builds? Maybe. At least you're not dependent on actually destroying objects. But it's still a very short-lived buff. Next we have Razeth's Volition. Skeletal Mage gains the effect of the Gift of Death rune. The Gift of Death rune simply means that when your Skeletal Mage dies, he leaves behind a corpse. That's a thing. I mean, it's better than nothing. The Necro already has quite a number of ways to spawn corpses. It's not a super exciting item. There has been some application. By having this, in fact, you're actually able to remove Golem entirely from the pet build, because you absolutely need to have Skeletal Mage for this build. You don't need to have your Golem. Typically, when I would use Golem with the pet build, it was the Golem that breaks down into 8 corpses so that you can revive things. With this, you don't need to have the Golem. Your Skeletal Mages will... Hey, wait a minute. They changed it to Skeletal Mage! They changed it to Skeletal Mage! It used to be Skeleton Mage. They changed it to Skeletal Mage. So next we have Skeletal Mage. We did it, folks. Anyway, it's kind of useful. And then we have Dainty's Binding. Once worn by a steadfast soul with a taste for victory, Dainty is community manager Nevelistus, aka Brandy Camel. It's her internet name that isn't her work internet name. So she's got an item named after her. And Dainty brings us some of the damage reduction that we so desperately need. Decrepify gains an additional up to 30% damage reduction for attacks against you. Still not quite enough. Again, this is just very, very preliminary analysis that the Necromancer is very squishy. One problem, for instance, with this set, the pet set, is that your damage reduction very much depends on having your pets actively attacking. And if that buff drops after 5 seconds of them not hitting anything, you're just dead. You get insta-gibbed. And that takes us to the weapons. Starting with the one-handers, we have the Scythe of the Cycle. Your secondary skills deal up to 300% additional damage while Bone Armor is active, but reduce the remaining duration of Bone Armor by 4 seconds. This is a great item. Our secondary items are Bone Spear, Skeletal Mage, and Death Nova. Giving us triple damage on those skills, awesome. And it comes at a cost, but it's not a cost that makes it unusable. You can still maintain your Bone Armor, you just gotta be more aggressive. Next we have the Funerary Pick. Siphon Blood drains blood from 2 additional targets. This is an interesting power. If this effectively gives us triple generation, then that makes Siphon Blood much more inviting. Already, its main purpose, I would say, Siphon Blood, is the rune that sucks in health globes. but if its effectiveness is tripled, then it's certainly a really good generator. Next we have Tragul's Corroded Fang. The Curse Scythe rune for Grim Scythe now has a 100% chance to apply a curse. This is up from a 15% chance. This is interesting, and this is exciting. How impactful it is, I'm not sure, but this is the kind of legendary power that I like. It's not just, this does more damage now, and it's not, this happens sometimes. The question then becomes whether it's worth to be able to constantly curse enemies for free, if that is worth trading out for another legendary weapon power. And that'll be to be determined. I seriously doubt this is overpowered. Hopefully it is powerful enough though. Next we have the Spear of Jesseth. Your thorns is increased by up to 15% for every enemy afflicted by one of your curses. So there is gonna be some attempt at making a thorns build for the Necromancer. There are some, there's a passive that lets your pets supply thorns damage, and there's little things here and there. This was meant to capture the spirit of the Iron Maiden curse from Diablo 2. I find it interesting that this is put on a spear. I guess it doesn't really matter. It's unfortunate that it is on a spear though, because a spear has a slower attack speed than a one-handed scythe, and your pets benefit from increased attack speed from you. That doesn't make them, so your attack speed increases their damage. It doesn't increase their attack speed, but it increases their flat damage. I would have expected this spear item to be something that benefits Bone Spear, but hey. Next, looking at two-handed scythes, we have the Dread Golem Spike, which is obviously gonna buff Golem somehow. Bone Spear now costs 40 essence and deals 150% increased damage. The best buff to Golem is to not need to use Golem. So this is doubling the essence cost of Bone Spear for more than double the damage. That's great, that's good. It's not the biggest buff, but it's there. Next we have the Blood Tide Blade. Death Nova now deals up to 20% increased damage for every enemy within 10 yards. I love it, I love it. This is a great Melee-mancer item. I haven't had a chance to test it out, but being able to get into the thick of things and then just slay a horde of demons, that's awesome. You can easily have 10 enemies within 10 yards. Well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe you can combine that with the that item that groups enemies so that you can have more clumped into 10 yards, and then you're easily getting, what, 200% more damage? 400% more damage? Then we have Rylina's Shadow Hook. Bone Spikes generates up to 4 additional essence for each enemy hit. Now, Bone Spikes normally generates 24 essence, so this is a little underwhelming, particularly compared to the Funerary Pick, which triples the effectiveness of Siphon Blood, whereas this, I mean, at best, how many enemies are you gonna hit at best? You would need to hit 12 enemies just to double your effectiveness. I don't know if this is quite enough to give up a legendary weapon power. And then we have Death's Scythe. Each different poison skill you use increases the damage of your poison skills by 100% for 15 seconds. This is really strong. Basically, using this, you can get your Army of the Dead to deal 5 times as much damage. Preliminary results are that this item rocks. And that covers our look at the new Necromancer items. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Are you liking what you're seeing? Stay tuned for more Necromancer videos where we're going to finish off our look at the skills and the passives and all that, as well as we're going to start taking a look at some builds that are emerging. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.